So I'm so pleased to introduce our speaker this morning. Joan Wolf is a retired physical therapist, and I didn't put this in my notes, but I just have to say it. Whenever I saw her her name in a chart of a patient that I was also seeing, I knew that they were getting wonderful care as a physical therapist. She was an amazing physical therapist. And she's been a volunteer for the local, she's been the volunteer local coordinator for Tax Aide in La Crosse for the last 10 years. She's married with 4 adult children and 10 grandchildren. She enjoys biking, organic gardening, hiking, kayaking, camping, cross-country skiing, reading. Can you be my friend? Her husband, Guy, who many of you know, previously worked in multicultural student services at UWL. And through the years of raising their kids, they informally had about 15 high school and or college-age kids live with them anywhere from 2 days to several years. And these young people had challenging situations at home. And on 2 occasions, they had 1-day-old babies and their unmarried parents staying at their house immediately after they were discharged from the hospital. Big hearts. Joan reflects that they learned a lot from these young people, and they added humor and craziness to their lives. They are grateful for all of them. And one final note, Joan generously chose to donate her fee, that what we would pay her as a speaker this morning, to WAFER. So please welcome Joan.
Thank you for inviting me. I just want you to know that Eric Kramer and Carla are AARP Tax Aide volunteers for many years, so it's kind of nice to see them here. I'm going to give you the mission of our local group. AARP Foundation Tax Aide provides free tax preparation for low to middle income Wisconsin residents of all ages, with a focus on seniors 50 and older. AARP's mission is to help eliminate senior poverty, and this is just one little part of doing that. Tax Aide currently has about 45 volunteers, has been in La Crosse for over 40 years. It started with Don Frank. I don't know if many of you know him. Yeah. And Don Frank was a retired engineer, and he and his nerdy engineer friends with their pocket calculators started 30 years ago or 40 years ago doing paper taxes at the library. So they were there for 30 years, which was really wonderful. Don was very committed to the program, but he was aging and it was difficult to continue, so I took over his position. We were at the library for 30 years. As soon as I took over, they decided to kick us out, so that was very... Unfortunately, I've had to find 3 different places to do this, which is kind of a lot of work and challenging. Anyway, but we have figured it out. So this upcoming tax season, we'll be providing services at 2 new sites. One is at the Reach Services and Resource Center, which is south of the Y. It was created by the Cooley Collaborative to End Homelessness. So it's a one-stop social service area for unsheltered and low-income people. So I'm really excited to work with them because it's great. You walk in the door and there's a lot of unsheltered people just eating peanut butter sandwiches. That's a place for them to hang out. So, and then we're also providing services at United Way in Onalaska, which is new for us. We've never provided something in Onalaska before. So, although some middle-income taxpayers receive our services, many of our clients are elderly and or disabled, and they come year after year. I remember, I'm going to give you a few stories. One disabled woman told me that she was thankful for her $300 refund because then she could buy a used couch so her grandson would have somewhere to sit when he came to visit her. Yeah, and I remember seeing people whose entire income was $12,000 a year from Social Security, $1,000 a month. I don't know how they survived. Another story that delights me, there was a young dad, maybe 30 years old, with 4 young children. Mom stayed home with the kids, and he worked at Walmart, so didn't make much money. And so we did his taxes, and he got He got like $20,000 in refunds from what's called earned income credit, because he was low income with a lot of dependents. But what delighted me is he told me that every year he came to Tax Aide, he would take that day off and go to each of the kids' schools, knock on the door of the classroom, and ask to have his kid come out. He'd give them a hug and then tell them to go back in. So that was, I'll never forget that guy. Then another story is about, I was training a new volunteer counselor, and an 80-year-old woman walked in, and she looked very straight-laced, very well-dressed, very petite, appeared very proper. But she started making hilarious, sarcastic comments out of the side of her mouth, like this. And she just kept belting them out. And the two of us were laughing so hard, it took forever to finish her taxes. So this is what we do. We call it volunteering, but it's actually quite joyful. And then one last story. Last year, I worked with a man in his 30s who had been recently diagnosed with an incurable brain tumor. And he had 2 young kids. His wife had recently divorced him, but seemed to want to help him. He was in the process of getting supplemental security income, which is income for very low income people. He had no income. He was not old enough to get Social Security, but because he could no longer work because of brain fog. At the time I saw him, he was crushed because his employer had just let him go, and his wife had recently divorced him. So, and walking in to the door of a place where there's a lot of people is very difficult for a person with brain fog. It's completely overwhelming. And I could see he was overwhelmed and worked up. And I knew how to handle that. He was easily overwhelmed trying to figure out his finances, let alone navigating the social service system. So I was able to take the time to help him relax and figure out who to contact to get all of the appropriate tax forms so I could prepare his taxes. So we did 90% of the taxes, and then I said, well, now go contact this person to get this, and contact that person to get that, and then come back, and then we'll finish. So we did that, and it was a privilege to be able to do that. And I don't know how he can navigate on his own. And I can't imagine the strength it takes for so many people in our community to navigate life alone with multiple limitations. And most of these people are in our community, but they are invisible to most of us. We don't see them at the grocery store. We don't see them at civic events. We don't see them riding their bikes. They're pretty isolated, and we don't even know they're there. And so it's a lot of them live in the those apartment buildings, the high rises, and it's a whole nother world. It's just a whole nother universe there. So most of our clients do not own a car or many of them don't own a car and do not know or own a computer or know how to use one. So in the 2024 tax season, the average adjusted gross income was $32,000, and we served 848 tax families who received about $530,000 in refunds. Before the pandemic, our taxpayers received $1 million in refunds, which is very likely spent right in our community because you need the couch, and most of them don't own cars. They couldn't afford tires, Where was I here? There we go. And we prepare simple tax forms, but it would cost $250 to $300 for our taxpayers to get their taxes completed. So the refund's not worth the cost, and it's not worth it. So if you take 848 tax families by $250, that's another $212,000 that they didn't have to spend. We partner with various civic organizations, including the Onalaska, Holman, and La Crosse Public Libraries, the Housing Authority, ADRC, that's Adult Disabilities and Resource Center, RSVP, which is Retired Senior Volunteer Program, the Diocese of La Crosse, the School District of La Crosse. We make connections with many people in our community, and they expand our services. And that's been really a joy to see people wanting to help. Just one recent example is that there was a Viterbo, I think she's a teacher, who just out of the blue somehow got my name and offered to help find student Spanish interpreters and connect with the Ho Chunk Center, Black Leaders Acquiring Knowledge, collective knowledge, and the Latino community. So that was really nice, to connect with those people. It's a world that, I don't see too often anymore. Through Reach Center, we'll now be able to connect with Cooley Cap, New Horizons Social Services, and who knows what else. It's a new adventure. So I was very sad. We were at the Hogan Administrative Center for several years, and as you know, that's being torn down to build a new school, which is great. But I was like, oh my gosh, I got to do this again. How am I going to find a place? So it was very difficult, but I'm very happy that we ended up at the Reach Center, right? What a perfect place. We provide tax preparations 3 days a week from February 2nd to April 9th this coming year. We have volunteers of many backgrounds, as you know, Carla, right? We have brilliant retired engineers. They are amazing. They're brilliant. Teachers, professors, CEOs from local companies, attorneys, CPAs, a person who worked in Homeland Security and an international airport, projects managers, IT professionals. One guy was the world director of IT at Train. Think about that. World director of IT at Train. We've had nurses, secretaries, a bus driver. Many have volunteered for 10 years or more. I've met amazing people who've been role models for me regarding how to age, like Betty. Common traits, they give back to the community. They interact with people of all ages and backgrounds. They have social networks, they continue learning, they travel, and they exercise to stay healthy. That's been good for me to watch. Like everyone else, our volunteers have had health issues and family concerns, but they seem to navigate them with grace. At least that's from my perspective. There is quite an amazing culture of helping each other without shame. It's okay to ask and say, I'm not sure, can you help me with this? In fact, that's expected. So it's really people helping each other. I mean, how can you know all the tax law, right? There's crazy, and it gets crazier every year, trust me. And we also have the greatest summer party. There are many volunteer opportunities. One is the tax counselor. They usually have done their own taxes for a few years, are willing to spend a lot of time studying in the fall. Carla goes, yeah. And they take several IRS certification exams and, 3-day class in January. It's a lot of work. So you got to want to do that. Client facilitators, they are the glue on the welcoming face of our program, Carla. They greet people, make sure tax paperwork's completed and in order, keep the flow of clients moving. Sometimes people bring in an entire grocery bag of tax forms, including their phone bill and electric bill. And they have to sort them all out, and some of those people take 45 minutes, But they get through, and then you make sure you give them another grocery bag for their... You can't keep their grocery bag of stuff. The client facilitators go through 4 to 6 hours of training in January. Phone schedulers are other volunteers. They work from home or a central location using Google Voice on a computer. And most taxpayers, about 70% schedule online, but about 30% do not know how to use a computer, and they call to schedule. These are our most vulnerable taxpayers, so phone schedulers are vital. You have to take a long time and listen. You're shaking your head, yes.
I'm one of them.
All right. All right. So every position is really important. It's really important. Then another one is chefs, which my lovely husband here helps with. They prepare lunches for all of our millions of training days. Guy Wolf and an old friend of ours make wonderful lunches for our training sessions. This year we'll be preparing lunches for 7 days of training for various volunteers. And the volunteers are from La Crosse on Alaska, Baroka, and Sparta. We're sort of the mothership, I guess. Lunches prepared with pride and love taste amazing. And food brings all of us together, right? And then there's behind the scenes volunteers, computer support, project managers to keep all of our moving parts organized. So it's really nice. I could do the job I do without having to have all these skills. I just find people that have those skills, and I'm very good at finding people that have those skills because I can't do all that. Lots of people are leaders. Once volunteers have worked for 2-3 years and feel comfortable with our system, we always need leaders. And I tend to see what they're good at and ask them. And the more that you ask people to do a little bit, the more they get invested and the longer they can stay. And there have been, the generation quite a bit ahead of me had kind of a philosophy of the leader does everything. Well, then that person ages out or something happens and nobody wants to take over, right? So I really think it's important that we have everybody do a reasonable amount according to their skill. And if they don't have time or they can't or they don't want to, that's okay. But I always ask. And 99% of the time they say yes because they're such a wonderful group. So here's an example of our group culture. Last year, we lost our host site at the Hogan Administrative Center, and we lost our phone schedulers because they were working with RSVP, and RSVP received an executive order about DEI. Yep. And so I just signed it, just in whatever. And then the state director said, no, that's a legal document. You can't sign it. I have to put it up the chain to the national AARP. Well, the national AARP said, we're not signing that. We're not going to sign that about DEI. So I lost my host site and all of our phone schedulers. Exactly. That's the third time. Right? And I feel like I'd spent 10 years building all this up and it all crushed, and I'd tell this on the phone to the state director. He said, I know you can do it, Joan. And it's like, really? It's nice you can sit there and I do it. Anyway, last year, let's see, I hunted for a new host site for 9 months and was rejected by many places. Since I had no host site and no phone schedulers, I was starting to lose hope. I asked our volunteers for help. And they connected with people in the community, and just like last week, all the pieces finally came together. That's what our group does. They're committed. They appreciate it. They do what they can. So one guy was on the United Way Board of Directors in Alaska, and he asked if we could use their conference room, which usually you have to pay for, and AARP won't let us pay anything. And they said, sure, we can do that. So we're hogging their conference room for 2 months, so that's great. So we need each other to make things work. Okay, so in conclusion, AARP Foundation Tax Aide is a wonderful opportunity to give back to the community. Many of our volunteers have told me it's the most fulfilling volunteer work they've done in their retirement. I personally love the interaction with volunteers, taxpayers, and community partners. I've met all kinds of people in the community, and I appreciate keeping my aging brain challenged, and it makes winter months fly by. So I'm proud of what our team has done. Thank you for letting me share it with you. Okay.